Yes, I'd like to welcome Brother Themba Anthony Sibeko to the Vanguard Show Podcast, sponsored by the book From Old Guard to Vanguard, the Second Generation Panther, and photo exhibit From Old Guard to Vanguard, the Panther's Untold LA Story. Brother, welcome to the Vanguard Show. It's an honor to have you.
Thank you, Malik, for having me. It's an honor from my side of the family on behalf of the Sibeko family, on behalf of the Azanians here in Sub-Saharan Africa. We welcome you and appreciate this opportunity, and thank your listeners for the invitation too. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I want to dedicate today's show to your brother, Bongani Sibeko, who I was honored to know and kept in touch with over the years. We always kept in touch with one another. I just want to send my condolences, since he's joined the realm of the ancestors, and I definitely wanted to pay homage to him today as well.
Thank you so much. It's a great loss for the family that Bongani is untimely passing. And was something that we have taken stock of, but we appreciate that he is with the ancestors and he's with both our parents.
Yeah.
So that gives us some sense of comfort as his siblings. So thank you for dedicating this show to my brother, my older brother.
Absolutely. And I had the pleasure again of meeting your mother. Doing a trip to Joburg. I think the hotel was the Marriott Garden Inn or something like that, downtown. And she came by daily with Bongani, and we had such spirited conversations. And I really appreciated my time speaking with her.
Yeah, when you come from a family of struggle, liberation is at the epicenter of your daily consumption. Mm-hmm. And you're a child, but at the same time, you're absorbing so much around you. And my mother was the anchor of the family. So with her, as most women, in the struggle, when you look at the history of the struggle, I don't care where you are, whether it's Haiti or whether it's Brazil, women are at the epicenter of the struggle. The warrior can't. It's not a patriarchal thing. There's a matriarchal aspect too. And my mother was a powerful matriarch, and equal impact in certain ways as my father. My father was spearheading the liberation struggle. But my mother, at the same time, because they're both in the Pan-Africanist Congress of Azania, as stalwarts, were equitable in their participation. Now, history-wise, David Sibeko, my father, had been in the ANC Youth League left in 1959 with Robert Sobukwe to form the Pan-Africanist Congress. And in that time, I was before I was born, but my sister was just born. And then subsequently, 1960, the decisive campaign for action by Sir Robert Sobukwe, the anti-pass campaign, was then conducted with David Sibeko as one of the conveners, one of the organizers. And he was then, at that time, wearing two hats. It's kind of a situation where, when you're working in the underground, you've got your day job, and he was working at Drum Magazine as a phone operator at one point. This is when he was a little bit younger, but then he fast forward to was selling insurance, and then moved to the Val Triangle and became the Val chairman for the PAC and under the military wing of POCO. And that's when my mother then was pregnant with me.
Okay.
So David was then given a mission after the 1960 massacres of the 69 Africans by the apartheid regime, unprovoked, after Robert Sobukwe had informed the authorities that there would be a nationwide shutdown to bring about a change with the passbook laws, which forced African men to carry passes, dome passes. However, that fateful day on March 21st, 1960, they used tanks and airplanes to shoot mostly men and women running, and some children in the back.
Right.
That's when we turned to the armed struggle. And Poko, which is the real thing, that's how in English would be called the real thing, was formed. And then my father became a military commander in there. He was then given a mission to blow up the power station in Orlando, Soweto, which was only supplying power to the white areas of Johannesburg, and to kidnap the judge. Fortunately, an informant within the organization who gave up my father's cell, and where they were arrested on a bus from Rustenburg on the way to their mission. He was subsequently then put charged with treason and was held in Johannesburg, which is at the famous Fort Prison, which is now been turned into our highest court in the land, which is a very unique decision and precedent that was set to turn the prison into a constitutional court. So he was held there 1962, and then 1963. I was then born November 12th, and he was released 2 days before, and hence why he named me Themba, which is trust and hope.
Okay.
He was given then the directive from Robert Sobukwe, who had already been arrested and put on Robben Island. By the way, Robert Sobukwe was separated from the general population, including Nelson Mandela. So that shows you how fearful they were of Robert Sobukwe at the time. And Sobukwe then sent orders to my father to leave South Africa and build up the structures for the PAC, for the armed struggle, and to build as many structures as they could, which the first one being in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. So we left in 1964 by foot through Botswana, and then Southern Rhodesia, and then Northern Rhodesia. I spent 3 weeks in KwaZulu under a tree. I was an infant at the time, and my siblings were, of course, in themselves, toddlers, with my mother, and my father eventually joined us. His one criteria was that if you want me to go into exile, I'm not going to do it without my family. He was a family man.
Right.
And so it was uncompromising in that sense. He said, you want me to make that sacrifice, then I'm leaving with my family. And so we eventually made it to Dar es Salaam by 1965. We stayed in Dar es Salaam until 1969, and he was then given the task of building structures in Europe, and then was appointed PAC director to the Europe and the Americas.
Okay. And I was going to ask now, your father, today's the anniversary of the transition of your father.
Yeah, so June 11th of 1979, there was several participants within the PAC military wing of the Azanian People's Liberation Army. Now, there was factionalism that was created by the former president of the PAC, Potlako Labalo, for a number of reasons. And there were allegations of Labalo's cooperation with the authorities, the apartheid authorities. And Sobukwe gave a directive to my father and to Ellis Nkledibe and to Vusmaki to set up a tricameral presidency and to remove Labalo. When that happened, and we've seen this happen before with Brother Malcolm X, is that you use your own people to remove you. And my father was then met by gunmen on June 11th. There was an altercation in Dar es Salaam, and he was shot several times. Avus Maki, who was with him in the apartment, miraculously survived, and then testified in the trial of those men for murder. So June 12th, he survived about a little bit over 24 hours and passed away June 12th today. So in a way, I dedicate this show to David Mapumzana Sibeko, along with his firstborn son, Bongani Sibeko. So thank you.
Yes,
for this.
absolutely. We
I
dedicate
know
the
you
show
didn't,
as well.
you didn't know at the time when you did June 12th, but I said that's no accident. So,
Absolutely.
it's no accident. There isn't.
Now, could you? Yeah, I was about to say thank you so much. And we also dedicated to your father, who was a tremendous inspiration. I see many pictures. Of course, I'm part of that Panther legacy.
Yes.
And you did with Huey P. Newton and your father, that famous picture.
Yes.
Yes, tell me about that.
So, and I was going to get to that, is that, when he was given the mission to build PAC structures within the European region, we moved in 1969 to London, and we set up a PAC office in London. And the portfolio also included the Americas. So in 1972, he was tasked with meeting with Brother Huey P. Newton in Oakland. I believe at this point, Brother Huey P. Newton had an apartment in Lake Merritt in Oakland. And that's where he took an audience with my father. Now, David Sibeko was a very convincing, charismatic, powerful individual. He was my father, but there was also David Sibeko, who was just a very imposing man. Physically, he could have been an obstacle for the Raiders.
Oh, wow. Okay.
The big man.
Big man,
6'1", 275. So he was a big man, imposing man. So, but it made him more bigger in character because of who he was.
Right.
So, and Mapumzane is the name of a Zulu king. So, he is now taking that mantle. So he goes to meet Huey P. Newton. I've been told, Bongani told me the story, by the way.
Okay.
So they meet, and, they're talking about the issue of, the ideology aspect of, Marxist-Leninists and Pan-Africanism. And Huey was driving his point across. It was supposed to be a 45-minute meeting, apparently.
Okay.
But my father would not relent.
Okay.
That meeting, and he got heated.
Oh,
I understand that the Huey had his bodyguards there, and I think when you have two alpha males coming together,
Clash of Titans.
So what I'm told is that after several hours,
Wow.
Huey P. Newton relented and said, "My brother, we are with the struggle with the PAC, and we understand Pan-Africanism and its roots," and gave the salute of the PAC, which is Israelite, which is the land is ours, and had convinced him. So, that's my father. He had walked in there, and he was skeptical, and several hours later he was saluting.
You learned that. Well, salute to him.
And the other pictures where they're just arm in arm and everything like that. So, but that's important to show how important it was for David Sibeko to build a bridge between the African American community and our struggle, and he didn't see it as been any way different from what was happening to the African American community as far as the American apartheid that was happening. And he repeatedly said that our struggle is your struggle, and continues to be in different permutations. Yeah. And we see that with Black Lives Matter. We see what's happening in regards to January 6th and what those undertones were. And there's a huge revelation as to what's happening in America. Chickens have come home to roost.
Yes,
so as Brother Malcolm said.
Absolutely.
I mean, I saw Liz Cheney's speech on, I think it was Friday.
Friday,
right. Well, Barry Goldwater, when he, just a little side note, when Nixon was resigning, I remember my dad, I think that day he pulled out the good stuff.
Oh, okay.
Nixon was saying goodbye, and I was a kid, and he used to call him Tricky Dick, like he got it from the Americans. And then there was Barry Goldwater says, "I can't believe I saw the whole thing." When he had to resign.
Wow.
So it's one of those moments right now with what's happening with these hearings. But anyhow, getting back to in the liberation struggle, we engaged with the Panthers because New African Republic and other groups like that, because we understood that the struggle was universal and there was a synergy there that you couldn't break. And the diaspora offered us an opportunity, and offered David Sibeko and Elizabeth Sibeko an opportunity to reach out. And one of the things that happened was, he organized the issue of disinvestment, of how to get US companies and multinationals exposed, because they were, of course, investing in propping up the apartheid regime. Right. And he went to Harvard, he went to Yale, he went to the Ivy League schools where the African-American student leaders were, and organized them. Wow. And said, this is the way, this is the best way you can hit them. Your board of trustees have investments in South Africa in these particular companies, whether it's Ford or it's Coca-Cola, whatever. He was able to convince them that this is the way to move, is to get into a campaign of this divestment of investments in the apartheid regime. And he traveled from the East Coast to the West Coast, from North and the West to Chicago, the length and breadth of America, campaigning for this disinvestment. And it grew into a cacophony. Wow. Okay. And Elizabeth Sibeko, at the same time, she then became into own within the PAC women's wing as well. She was doing work through the United Nations Development, UNDP. And she also, in 1975, was one of the people that kind of spearheaded the Women's Conference, which is now an annual thing. Which the first one was in Mexico City in 1975. So that was Elizabeth Sibeko's contribution as well, saying that we know we need to bring women to the forefront of the universal struggle against subjugation and neo-colonialism. Okay. And so in equal strength, that was important too.
Okay. I was going to ask, do you think today's youth are aware of the whole apartheid global movement that went on? Because I was around. I remember that. I remember colleges, universities, students, the divestment, even in TV shows like Different World, they talked about the apartheid issue. Do you think today's youth, really know anything about that today?
No, we have seen in the last 20, 25 years is, and really you have to also take into consideration that social media is a double-edged sword. It's a tool that can be used for good, but it can also be used for distraction. Right. And the youth today, I think for the best part, is really caught up in a myriad of so many things that don't hold them down, because it could be driven by material based, because based on what they see, whether it's music or it's film, the consumption. And we're talking about also more so the American youth. Right. It's kind of it's deteriorated the educational system to where it is right now. I think if you said apartheid, maybe the best reference you get is maybe Nelson Mandela, and that's it. Right. And Nelson Mandela has, was created in a way that Nelson Mandela, he himself was, I think, at length sometimes concerned, because yes, he was of a different ideology within the ANC, but it's almost as if they kind of created him as if he was a Father Christmas, which he wasn't. At the end of the day, he was part of the struggle. But for the Western agenda, they needed somebody who was moderate, who could push their agendas to a certain extent.
Okay. I was going to say, explain the difference between the ANC and the PAC, because a lot of people think, well, the ANC is more like, Martin Luther King and what have you. PAC was like Malcolm, the Nation, Republic of New Africa. So explain that kind of dynamic difference.
I want you to understand that when the Freedom Charter was written in within the ANC, the parental body of the ANC, the idea that in the Freedom Charter that the land belongs to all who live in it is contrary towards what we know. Nowhere else in the world do you know where the thief is allowed to keep the land that he stole.
Exactly.
So you set a precedent by saying that if you dispossess me of my land over the last 300 years, 250 years, and I get democratic dispensation, the thief has a right to keep that land that he stole.
Wow.
That's a problem.
Yes.
So the agenda in itself is who drafted that agenda? I mean, who drafted the charter? Because the charter in itself, it keeps the interests of those internally who may have been moderate and have benefited from years of neocolonialism and colonialism, and from the issue of the assets that were taken, land and so forth, minerals as well.
Right.
Why would you do that? So that was a split within the ANC Youth League. Sibeko was part of that. Along with my father said, no, that can't be. If we are subjugated and we come into our own, it has to be about the issue of Pan-Africanism, Africa for Africa, fought by Africans, for Africans. Your allegiance cannot be to France because you are European in origin. It cannot be to the United Kingdom. It cannot be to the Dutch. It has to be to Africa. And so the distinction was made by Robert Sibeko is that it's not a racial issue. It's about the issue of non-racialism through Pan-Africanism, which means that there's only one race, and that is the human race. However, your allegiance is to Africa, right, not to the forebears who brought you here. And the idea of Pan-Africanism is also self-reliance by also looking at the issue of a social democratic egalitarian society, which would be in the formation of Azania. Right now, what we have is a country with a direction, South Africa. We had democratic dispensation in 1994, but it's all fallen apart. The ruling party has created a kleptocracy that has been perpetuated. And we've limped from one administration to another and have to deal with the issue of corruption, the issue of cadre deployment, the issue of poverty, unemployment. And that cannot bear fruit. That cannot be good. So it shows that my father had said that the ANC, should they take power when we are free,
right, wow,
will not be the vanguard of the people. The PAC were the vanguard of the people. The PAC, through David Sibeko and his cohorts, were able to turn the forces through armed struggle to a point where the regime was forced to come to negotiation table.
Right. And this is no difference than, issues in, any society, products, those are Palestinians, Israelis, Irish, and, what have you, the stuff that's going on in Ireland. So again, when you've exhausted all means, the gun, and obviously some kind of military aggression needs to be
that's an unfortunate thing. And I'll repeat the fact that Robert Sibeko at this point in 1960 took peaceful action campaign is what was spearheaded by the PAC with the anti-pass campaign. He instructed that all people are to leave their passes at home and to surrender themselves to the police stations, because he knew he was a very intelligent man. He knew they couldn't arrest everyone.
Right.
Over 75,000 people.
Wow.
And there was a point where South Africa almost collapsed. The regime almost collapsed. They had to make an example. And the example was by killing Africans. Wow. to send a message to the multinational investors who had put money into South Africa. We got this handled. We got our blacks in line. And hence that triggered the armed liberation, because pacifism didn't work.
I was so impacted when I was in South Africa on various levels, but especially the monument to Hector Peterson, I think, who was one of the first killed during the Soweto uprisings. Yes. There's so many events that went on in South Africa that became very impactful to me, and I tried to write about that. And do you think most people understand the scope of what was going on in South Africa, because it was really the Jim Crow, as we had Jim Crow here, there, but in a more contemporary times, in the 80s, late 70s, 80s, 90s. How do you think that era is really received by or looked back on by most people?
I think well, we have to understand what Robert Sobukwe did. Again, the genius of this man who was uncompromising. And that's why the regime, actually, when he left Robben Island, was then put into solitary confinement in Kimberley. And they actually created a legislation called the Sobukwe Clause, which held him without charge in perpetuity. Sounds familiar because that was used in Guantanamo Bay.
Yes, absolutely.
For 9/11. Oh, yes.
That's right.
The Boers set that precedent by doing that. So the idea that Afrikaans, the language, was going to be used as a medium of instruction, was a way for Robert Sobukwe to try and undermine the campaign through the youth. He saw the future, and the future was going to be with the youth of 76. Okay. And the Bethel 18 trial, the secret trial that the Boers held, the apartheid regime held, my father, David Sibeko, wrote a book about the secret trials. And Zef Mutuping, who was then basically internally within the PAC president of within South Africa. And he had organized with the youth to then march on and leave the classrooms on June 16, 1976. Hector Peterson was unfortunately not a political activist. He got caught up in a fusillade of bullets that had no name. And however, because of the picture that was taken of him being carried by that young man, he got worldwide notoriety, but he was not the first child to be shot. But he was the one who was the most popular martyr of the struggle. So I think that there's nostalgia with, and for the wrong reasons, I think, with the political parties today, because you can't rest on those laurels of what happened in 1976. The youth today are not relying on your presidential credentials, I mean your struggle credentials. Right. They want jobs, they want food, they want security, they want to know they have a better life ahead of themselves. But when they look at what this current government is doing and how the state coffers have been emptied out, and the level of corruption, even now the current president himself is under duress due to recent indiscretions when it came to the issue of his farm and millions of dollars being found his farm stolen and then him not disclosing. So this shows once again the current government is not ready to govern African people. So it's not yet Azania. It's just South Africa right now, Malik. Okay. And that's what we know, that we have to go through this in order to get to Azania. Right. We will get there one day. And thanks to the ability of the grassroots movements within the United States and African American communities, the Black Panthers, who contributed to us getting this far. That helped.
Yeah. Well, I want to definitely delve into your various talents, because I look at you as so much of a Renaissance man. Film, music, TV. You've been so involved in so much. Talk about some of your personal history in those areas.
Well, it being in exile, I think one thing, my father, he loved music and he loved movies. So, I got introduced to, the Crusaders, the Jackson 5, Steely Dan, James Brown, Miles Davis, John Coltrane, just about, any good music through my father. He loved music. And I didn't realize at that time, he was a young man. I mean, he was in his 20s, late 20s when we moved to England. He had a lot more access to, exposing us to that. So then I fell in love with movies and music. So the two merged, and then I became I became I am a creative. I'm an artist. I'm within the family. I'm right-brained, and I think both my parents loved it and they encouraged it, and I studied it in high school and took an IBH in art and in anthropology, and then I took political science as a freshman, and I was like, listen, I ain't gonna teach and I ain't gonna work for government. So I went to film. I went to film theory and film production, and the rest is history. And I've been in it almost 35 years as a creative executive writer, producer. But my inspiration was the spaghetti westerns, was Sergio Leone, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly.
Yes,
I saw that in Tanzania as a kid, and that just blew me away. And I guess The Sound of Music, that was kind of musical.
Oh, classics, yes,
classics. And then, but my father also liked to take us to the latest James Bond movie. He loved that. So,
oh wow.
Then that was a treat, like Christmas. If we could get him. Right. Because he was a very busy man doing what he was doing. The struggle is what they say, the struggle. Right. The things you give up as a child, you don't really understand, but you kind of understand that, listen, this is how it is. It is what it is. But on the talent side, I've been fortunate that I've been able to work with some of the people that I idolized when I was growing up, watching them on the screen. So I'm very fortunate that way. Work with people like Bill Duke and Danny Glover and Samuel Jackson. I mean, these are people I call friends. I'm very blessed that way, that our paths cross and continue to cross whenever. So and I did I cut my teeth at doing music videos in New York City. I had my own company. In the 90s, I was the only Black South African in Midtown Manhattan with his own production company doing rap videos, hip hop videos.
Incredible.
And then a friend of mine from college, he shows up in 1989 and says, "Hey man, I got this new group called Digital Underground."
Oh wow!
I said, "What?" And he moved to Oakland. So I gone to Oakland in '86 because there's a lot of connection because it's the home of the Panthers, and I knew brothers like brother Joe Brooks and other ones that through my father, and this was his network.
Right.
So I always had an affinity for Oakland, and then he introduced me to the guys from Digital Underground and
Tupac as well.
Then I met a young man named Tupac. I said, that's an interesting name, and we hit it off, and we hit it off. But things change, but it was a wonderful time, and I miss the brother. But I remember going back to my mom. I said, "Hey man, I just met this guy, Tupac Shakur." And she said, "Oh yeah, that's most probably thing's son." I said, "Oh, because he didn't say that to me." And so I said, "Okay, cool." She said, I know. She said, "No, I know the Shakurs, and I know Asante, and she's in Cuba and all that." And my mom was just like, and she doesn't get impressed. She was just that kind of person, just impressive.
All knowledgeable.
But Tupac at that point was not known. He was just a young kid. He was a roadie when I met him.
Right.
And then within 3 or 4 years, it just, America just, he caught on, and he was at the right time. He was saying the right things.
Yeah.
And
Well, we have about 5 minutes left. I want to get into some of the future projects you have going on that people could look out for.
Yeah. So a future project, which will, I guess, what it really interests me right now is looking at the history of our heroes within the diaspora outside of Africa.
Okay.
So, Malik, I have been fascinated with the history of Zumbi.
Yes.
Los Primordios of Brazil.
Yes.
So I'm writing a limited series right now on Zumbi, a co-production with Brazil, to be shot in Brazil and South Africa, about his ascension to the Quilombos, which is basically the free settlement of runaway slaves. So his whole ascension from being kidnapped and converted to Catholicism, to running away from the Portuguese, to joining his uncle Zumba, who started the Quilombos, and then ascending to warrior king. I think it's a fascinating story, and his warrior queen, Dandara. So I'm currently in the writer's room working on that, and hopefully make an official announcement.
Well, I'm gonna have to send you an article I wrote years ago called Brazil, Taste of Africa. And I actually visited in Bahia, Salvador Bahia, the airport
I've
named
seen
in his
pictures,
honor.
yeah.
Yes,
The airport's
absolutely.
named in his honor.
Yes.
I'll tell you, when I was in Brazil, the first time I went to Brazil in 2004, real quickly, was I took a delegation. I was a film commissioner for Johannesburg, Gauteng province, the first film commissioner. And I took, in 2004, it was, at that time it was, we looked at it, it was 10 years of democracy. So I took 15 filmmakers, and I was in downtown Brazil, and I saw this bus of this black man, this powerful black man. I was like, who is that? They're like,
yes,
man, that's our national hero. That's Zumbi.
Yes, I stood next to that statue.
So I was like, what? And I just got goosebumps. I'm like, wow. And I was fascinated, and from that just kind of triggered it. So that's one of my projects. And then the other one's a crime anthology.
Okay.
It's kind of, it's a mashup of true South African history, but I've kind of taken the genre and turned it on its ear, and it's a crime anthology that also deals with historical figures and historical groups in South Africa who labeled as gangs.
I was going to say, before we go, I want to definitely make sure you give all the information where people could follow you. And I want to say thank you for allowing me to meet Brother Ade, Adika Makinde, when I was in London. Yes,
that's my childhood. Well, that's my childhood friend. So we lived in Hendon, in northwest London, when we moved from Dar es Salaam to London, cold, gray London, and they were.
We have about 2 minutes as well.
Yeah, so there was this Nigerian family across the street, and we just hit it off, and so we were just childhood friends. So that was great.
Okay, so, and how can people contact you, reach out to you in terms of following?
Reach out to me. So on Twitter, it's Ziya Walks. On LinkedIn, Themba Anthony Sibeko. On Facebook, you can find me there on Themba Sibeko, and then I have a Facebook group called Mental Wealth and Health Mzansi, which is a new initiative for boy, child, and youth intervention for self-love and trying to talk about things that are hard, because we just came out of a hard lockdown globally, and especially in South Africa, we have a high rate of suicide amongst our youth, and we need to try and save them. So that's in honor of this youth of 76, because they sacrificed their lives so that this youth could have a future. So what's the point if we don't do anything about saving that future and Azania in essence?
Well, brother, I want to thank you so much. It's been such an honor to meet you and finally get some time to speak with you. And I also heard you have a young thespian in the family as well. But we'll have to get back to that.
We'll get back to that. Yes, the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree. So
you got that
right. You're right there. Brother Malik, thank you so much. And
thank you so much, brother.
I appreciate the time and the opportunity. Have a glorious day.
You too, my brother. You take care.
A luta continua.
A luta continua.